If you are enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Marcus Blackwood, and I've been the Chief Ranger at Shoshone National Forest for the past 15 years. Most folks around here know me as the guy who never loses a trail, though these days, I sometimes wish I wasn't so good at finding things. I'm 47 now, and life has left its marks on me. The Korean War took away my youth, and this forest, well, it took something else entirely. Every morning, I look in the mirror and see the same tired face, gray starting to creep into my dark hair, wrinkles around my eyes that weren't there before, and a scar on my left cheek from a camping accident that feels like a lifetime ago. The only thing that stayed constant is the lucky compass I carry. It's nothing special, just an old military compass I had during the war. But it's never failed me, not once. Even when everything else went wrong, this little brass companion always pointed true north. I keep it in my jacket pocket, right next to my heart. Sometimes, late at night, I can feel its weight there, reminding me I'm not alone. 3 years ago, I lost my partner Tom in these woods. We were best friends, more like brothers really. He disappeared during a routine patrol, and despite searching for weeks, all we found was his ranger hat near Devil's Creek. That's when the nightmare started. Not just about Tom, but about things I saw in Korea too. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, hearing voices that aren't there. The locals respect me, I think. They see me as this tough, reliable ranger who can handle anything. If they only knew how many times I've sat alone in my cabin, hands shaking, trying to forget the things I've seen. But I keep going because that's what Tom would have wanted, and because these woods, they need someone who understands them. I never thought I'd be telling this story. Honestly, I wish I didn't have to. But after what happened in the winter of '62, people need to know. They need to understand that some things in this world can't be explained by logic or science. Sometimes, the old legends are more than just stories to scare children. And let me tell you, what I experienced in those ancient pines during that brutal winter changed everything I thought I knew about reality. This is my story, and I swear on my lucky compass that every word of it is true. It all started in early December 1962. That winter was different from any I'd seen before. The snow came down harder than usual, and there was something odd about the way it fell. Even the old-timers in town said they'd never seen anything like it. I remember sitting in my ranger station one morning, drinking coffee and going through some paperwork, when the first report came in. A group of 3 hikers hadn't returned from their weekend trip. Now, missing hikers weren't uncommon. People often got lost, but they usually found their way back, or we'd find them within a day or two. But something felt wrong this time. My gut was telling me this was different, and in my line of work, you learn to trust your gut. I grabbed my gear and headed out to their last known location. The snow was deep, almost up to my knees in some places. The air felt heavy, if that makes sense. Like when a storm is coming, but worse. Much worse. What I found at their campsite still gives me chills. Their tent was there, perfectly set up. Their supplies were scattered around, but not like animals had gotten to them. It looked like someone had been searching for food, frantically. Half-eaten cans of beans, torn open backpacks, even tree bark had been chewed on. But the tracks were what really got to me. I've been tracking animals and people for most of my life, but I'd never seen anything like these. They looked almost like deer prints, but they were too big, and they showed whatever made them was walking on 2 legs. That evening, as I was documenting everything, Old Joe from the local tribe came to see me. He was in his 70s, and people said he knew more about these woods than anyone alive. The moment he walked into my office, I could tell something was wrong. His usually calm face was tight with worry. "Marcus," he said, sitting down heavily in the chair across from my desk. "The spirits are restless. The ancient evil has awakened. I'd known Joe for years, and I'd never seen him this serious. He told me about an old legend, about something his people called the Hunger Walker, a creature that brought unnatural hunger and cold with it, something that could make you hear things that weren't there. I didn't want to believe him. I was a practical man. I dealt in facts, not folklore. But as I sat there, listening to the wind howling outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that Joe was right. Something was out there in my forest, something that shouldn't exist. And that was just the beginning. If I'd known then what was coming, I might have run far away from Shoshone Forest. But I didn't. I stayed because it was my job to protect these woods and the people in them. Looking back now, I realized that night was the last normal moment I would have for a long time. After that, everything changed. The horror that followed. Well, that's the part of the story I still have trouble telling. The next day, I decided to search deeper into the forest. The morning was unusually quiet. No bird songs, no squirrels running around, nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your heart beat faster. I found an old journal near a frozen creek, half buried in snow. It belonged to one of the missing hikers, a woman named Sarah. The last few entries made my blood run cold. Day 3. Something's wrong. We're so hungry. The food we packed should last a week, but we can't stop eating. John finished all his snacks in one go. Day 4. The sounds at night. Someone keeps calling my name. It sounds like my mom, but that's impossible. She passed away last year. Day 5. So cold. The temperature gauge says it's only 30 degrees, but it feels like we're freezing. Steve swears he saw something watching us from between the trees. It was tall. So tall. That was the last entry. The rest of the pages were torn out. While reading, I noticed something strange happening around me. The trees seemed to be covered in frost patterns I'd never seen before. They looked like symbols, like something you'd see in ancient cave paintings. My compass started acting weird too, the needle spinning in circles instead of pointing north. Then I heard it, Tom's voice. My dead partner calling out to me. "Marcus, help me, I'm over here." It sounded exactly like him, down to the way he used to say my name. For a split second, I almost ran toward it. But then I remembered old Joe's warning about the creature that could copy voices. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my radio to call for backup. Nothing but static. The voice called again, closer this time. The air got colder, so cold it hurt to breathe. My flashlight started flickering, and the shadows between the trees seemed to move. That's when I saw the tracks again, those impossible tracks. They were fresh, leading deeper into the forest. But this time, there was something else. Drops of frozen blood in the snow, and bits of cloth that looked like they came from the hikers' jackets. I knew I should head back, call for help, make a plan. But something told me, if I left now, I'd never find those hikers alive. The sun was starting to set, and in these woods, darkness brings things worse than the cold. As I followed the tracks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't hunting something. It was hunting me. And the hunger, a strange, deep hunger, started growing in my stomach, even though I'd eaten just hours ago. Little did I know, I was walking straight into a nightmare that would change my life forever. The light was fading fast, and the cold was getting worse. Every breath I took made little clouds in front of my face. That's when I found it, the second camp. But this one was different. Very different. The tent was ripped to shreds, like something big and angry had torn through it. What scared me most wasn't the damage, though. It was the way everything was frozen solid. The sleeping bags, water bottles, even a half-eaten sandwich, all turned to ice, even though it wasn't nearly cold enough for that to happen naturally. I heard Tom's voice again, but this time it changed mid-sentence. It started as Tom but ended in a sound I can't really describe, like ice cracking mixed with an animal growl. My skin crawled. Then I saw it, just for a second, through the trees. It was huge, maybe 12 feet tall. Its body was skinny, like someone who hadn't eaten in months, but the head. The head was like an elk's skull, with antlers that reached up into the branches. It moved in a way that wasn't right, like watching someone trying to walk who'd never learned how. I froze. 20 years as a ranger, and I'd never felt fear like this. The thing turned its head toward me, and I saw its eyes. They glowed blue, like the heart of a glacier. That's when the hunger hit me harder. It felt like I hadn't eaten in weeks. My stomach hurt so bad I almost doubled over. I grabbed my lucky compass for comfort, and that's when something strange happened. The creature seemed to back away from it. The compass was warm in my hand, the only warm thing in what felt like a frozen world. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life. Through the static, I heard a real voice, Bobby, one of my junior rangers. "Chief, come in. We've got a rescue team heading your way. 5 people. They should reach you in about an hour." I tried to answer, but the radio died again. My relief didn't last long, though, because right then I heard screaming in the distance. Human screaming. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. It moved so fast it was just a blur, disappearing into the darkness between the trees. I had a choice to make. I could head back to safety, or I could follow those screams and maybe save someone's life. But following meant going deeper into the forest, with night coming on fast and that thing out there. I checked my watch. 5:30 p.m. The rescue team would be here in an hour, but something told me that whoever was screaming wouldn't last that long. Taking a deep breath, I gripped my compass tight and started walking toward the screams. What I found next, well, that's when things got really bad. I followed the screams until they led me to an old cave I'd never seen before. Strange, because I thought I knew every inch of these woods. The entrance was covered in those same icy symbols I'd seen on the trees, glowing faintly in the dying light. The screaming had stopped, and that silence was worse than any noise. My flashlight beam showed footprints leading into the cave, both the deer-like tracks and human boots. I had to go in. The cave was like a freezer. My breath came out in thick clouds, and ice covered the walls. But what stopped me in my tracks were the drawings on those walls. Ancient paintings showing a tall, skeletal figure with an elk skull head. The same thing I'd seen in the woods. The paintings showed it hunting people, leading them into darkness. Deeper in the cave, I found them. The missing hikers. They were alive, but changed. Their eyes were glazed over, and they were eating. I can't even say what they were eating. They didn't even look up when my light hit them. The hunger had taken over completely. Then I heard it, the sound of bones cracking and ice forming. The creature was right behind me. I spun around and finally saw it clearly. Its skin was like old leather stretched over bones, and frost formed wherever it touched. But its eyes? Those eyes looked almost human, filled with an endless hunger. That's when my radio crackled again. The rescue team had arrived early. I could hear them calling outside the cave. "Chief Blackwood, where are you?" The creature's head turned toward the sound, and I saw what it was planning. It was waiting for them. This was a trap, and I'd led them right to it. I had to make a choice, fast. The hikers were too far gone to save, but maybe I could stop anyone else from suffering the same fate. I reached for the dynamite in my pack, the stuff we used for clearing fallen trees. I had just enough time to do what needed to be done. But the creature, it knew. It started moving toward me, faster than anything that big should be able to move. The cave walls began to freeze solid, ice crackling everywhere. I gripped my compass in one hand, dynamite in the other, and made the hardest decision of my life. I yelled as loud as I could, "Stay back! Don't come in!" to the rescue team. Then I did something crazy. I ran deeper into the cave, away from the entrance. Just like I hoped, the creature followed me, its heavy footsteps echoing behind me. The rescue team's voices got fainter as I ran. Good. At least they were safe. My flashlight showed me where I was heading, a big chamber at the back of the cave. The walls were covered in more of those ancient drawings, but these were different. They showed people trapping the creature using sacred objects. And there, in the center of the chamber, was a circle of symbols carved into the floor. That's when I understood what my lucky compass really was. The tribal markings on it matched the symbols on the cave walls perfectly. All these years I'd been carrying something special without knowing it. The creature entered the chamber. In the beam of my flashlight, it looked even more terrifying. But now it moved slowly, cautiously, like it knew something was wrong. My hands were shaking as I quickly set up the dynamite around the chamber's entrance. The creature watched me, its head tilted like a curious dog. Maybe it didn't understand what I was doing. Or maybe it did, and was just too hungry to care. "This ends here," I said, holding up my compass. The creature hissed, a sound like wind through dead trees. It lunged at me, just as I threw the compass into the center of the symbol circle. The metal hit the stone floor with a ring that seemed to echo forever. The creature froze mid-leap, like it had hit an invisible wall. I struck my last match and lit the dynamite fuse. "Time to close your door forever," I whispered. The creature let out a screech that shook the whole cave. Ice started forming everywhere, trying to stop me. But I'd already started running, counting down in my head. 10 seconds. 9. 8. The explosion hit before I reached 3. The last thing I remember was being thrown forward by the blast, rocks falling everywhere. Then everything went black. They never found my body. At least, that's what they say. The rescue team searched for days, but all they found was my ranger badge, covered in frost, near the sealed cave entrance. The hikers' bodies were never found either. The cave-in was so complete that no one could get back inside. Maybe that's for the best. That was 13 years ago. The forest has changed since then. The winters aren't as harsh anymore, and the animals have returned. But strange things still happen around that cave. Every year, when the first snow falls, people say they hear voices. Sometimes it's Tom's voice, sometimes it's mine, calling for help. The local tribe performs a special ceremony there each winter, keeping whatever's left of that evil locked away. New rangers have taken my place, good people who keep the forest safe. But sometimes, on really cold nights, they say they see someone walking through the trees, a tall figure in a ranger's uniform, carrying a flashlight. They say it's me, still patrolling, still protecting these woods. Maybe they're right, because you see, I didn't die in that cave. At least, not completely. I'm still here, watching, waiting. The creature is trapped, but not gone. I can feel it sometimes, deep under the rock and ice, getting hungrier, growing stronger. My compass keeps it contained. That's why I left it there. As long as it stays in that circle of symbols, the evil can't escape. But lately, I've been noticing the ice patterns appearing on trees again. And last week, a hiker reported hearing strange voices calling him by name. So I'm telling this story now as a warning. If you ever visit Shoshone National Forest in winter, and you hear a familiar voice calling you into the woods, don't follow it. If you feel a hunger that can't be satisfied, turn back. And if you see a tall figure with an elk's skull head watching you from between the trees, run. Because some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. And some hungers never die. Here's what people say about Shoshone Forest these days. Every winter, strange things still happen around here. The locals won't go near that sealed cave, and they warn their children to stay away. They say if you put your ear to the ground nearby, you can hear something scratching deep below. The current rangers have a special rule: no one patrols alone during snowfall. They've seen things they can't explain. Perfect circles of frozen animals in the middle of summer, strange frost patterns that look like ancient writing, and deep tracks in the snow that stop suddenly, as if whatever made them vanished into thin air. Old Joe's grandson, who's now an elder himself, leads the yearly ceremony at the cave. He says the evil is still there, getting stronger each year. The compass, he tells people, won't hold it forever. Last month, a young ranger found something disturbing. My old journal, perfectly preserved in ice. The last entry, written in my handwriting, was dated yesterday. But that's impossible, isn't it? The Forest Service keeps a special file now. They record every strange incident, the unexplained voices, the missing hikers who turn up days later with no memory but terrible hunger, and the sightings of what they call the Tall One. Some say I made the wrong choice that day, that I should have found another way, but they don't understand. Some evils can't be destroyed, only contained. And sometimes, the price we pay to protect others is to become part of the story ourselves. So, if you're ever hiking in Shoshone Forest, and you see a ranger in an old-style uniform watching you from a distance, or if you hear someone calling your name in a voice you know couldn't be there, remember my story. Because I'm still here, still walking these woods, and I'm not the only one watching from the shadows. Just remember, that hunger you feel, it might not be your own. And that voice calling you, it might not be who you think it is. Stay safe, stay alert, and whatever you do, don't follow the voices into the dark. My name is Eleanor Winters, but everyone calls me Elle. I've been a wildlife biologist at Olympic National Park for almost 15 years now, though these days I barely recognize the forest I once knew so well. I should probably start by telling you what happened 5 years ago, the day that changed everything. I was tracking a herd of elk with my 7-year-old daughter Sarah. She loved coming to work with me, always wearing her tiny ranger hat that was too big for her head. That morning was like any other. Crisp air, birds singing, Sarah skipping along the trail picking up colorful leaves. "Mom, look at this one," she'd say every few minutes, holding up another maple leaf, like it was made of gold. But then the birds went quiet, all of them, at once. In my years as a ranger, I'd learned that when the forest goes silent, something's very wrong. I called Sarah to come closer, but when I turned around, she was gone. Just gone. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign of struggle, nothing. We searched for weeks, the whole Park Service, local police, volunteers, everyone, but Sarah simply vanished into thin air. The official report said she probably fell into one of the deep ravines, but I knew better. I'd seen something that day, just for a split second, a shadow that moved wrong, leaving what looked like burning footprints that disappeared before anyone else could see them. That's when I started studying cryptozoology, the science of unknown creatures. My colleagues laughed at me, called me crazy. "Poor Elle," they'd whisper. The grief broke her. But I knew what I saw. I knew something was out there. Now, 5 years later, I'm still here in the park, still searching, still waiting, and lately, things have been getting strange again. The animals are acting weird, pets are going missing from the nearby town, and I keep finding perfect circles of burned ground in the forest. But the strangest thing? Tomorrow night is a blood moon eclipse, exactly 5 years since Sarah disappeared, and this morning I found fresh burning footprints in the dirt outside my ranger station. This time, I'm ready. This time, I'll find out what really happened to my daughter. I just hope I'm not too late. It's 6 a.m., and I'm already at my desk in the ranger station, looking through old reports. My coffee has gone cold, 3rd cup this morning. My partner Mike keeps telling me I need to sleep more, but how can I? The signs are all coming back. "Elle, you need to see this." Mike calls from the doorway. He's holding his phone, showing me a video from a local family. Their dog is barking at something in their backyard, but all you can see is a dark shape moving behind the trees. What catches my eye isn't the shape, it's the ground where it walked. Small flames flicker in its footsteps, just like what I saw 5 years ago. "That's the 4th missing pet this week," Mike says, running his hand through his graying hair. "And look at this." He spreads out a map on my desk. Red pins mark where animals have been found. Deer, rabbits, even a bear, all with strange marks on them, like someone carved symbols into their fur. My hands start shaking. "Mike, these marks form a circle around the old burial grounds." Just then, our radio crackles to life. The static is different today. It sounds almost like whispers. I grab my gear, flashlight, radio, and the gun I never used to carry before Sarah disappeared. I'm going to check the burial grounds, I tell Mike. He grabs his jacket to come with me, but I stop him. No, I need you here, if anything happens. I don't finish the sentence. We both know what I mean. The drive up to the burial grounds takes 30 minutes. The forest feels wrong today. No birds singing, no squirrels running around. Even the trees look different, darker somehow. As I park my truck, I notice something that makes my heart stop. A small, rainbow-colored hair clip lying in the dirt. Sarah's hair clip. The one she was wearing that day. It looks brand new, like it was just dropped here. My radio buzzes. "Elle?" Mike's voice is shaky. "You need to get back here. Now. Something's happening in town. All the dogs are going crazy and I just saw something. Something that looked like." The radio cuts off. I reach for my phone to call him back, but there's no signal. The air feels heavy, like right before a storm. And then I hear it, a sound I haven't heard in 5 years. A child's laugh, coming from deep in the woods. Sarah's laugh. My heart is racing as I follow the sound of Sarah's laugh. The old burial grounds are ahead, with their weathered stone markers half hidden in tall grass. The air gets colder with each step I take, even though it's the middle of a hot summer day. "Sarah?" I call out softly. No answer, just the crunch of leaves under my feet. Then I see something that makes me freeze. Footprints, small ones like a child's, burned into the ground. They're still smoking. My hands clutch my flashlight tighter as I follow them, even though it's broad daylight. Old habits die hard, I guess. Suddenly, my radio comes back to life. It's Mike, but his voice sounds strange, almost like he's underwater. "Elle, they're here, at the station. I can see them. They're not. They're not human, Elle. They..." Static cuts him off. I should run back to help Mike. I know I should. But those footprints, they're leading to the old cave behind the burial grounds. The one the local tribes said was sacred. The one they warned us never to enter. As I get closer to the cave, I spot something scratched into a tree. It's fresh, the bark still damp where it's been carved. It's the same symbol I found on those animals, but bigger. And below it, written in what looks like fresh blood. "Come home, Mom." My hands are shaking so bad, I almost drop my flashlight. That's when I hear it. A low humming sound coming from the cave. It's not mechanical. It sounds almost like singing? No, not singing. More like dozens of voices whispering all at once. I take out my phone to record it. Old research habits. But it's dead. So is my watch. Everything electronic just stopped. The sun is starting to set, and I can see the moon rising early. It's already turning a deep red. The blood moon eclipse is starting, just like 5 years ago. That's when I see him, Mike, standing at the cave entrance. But something's wrong. He's too still, like a statue. And his eyes, they're completely black. "We've been waiting for you, Elle," he says, but it's not his voice. It sounds like many voices speaking together. Sarah's been so patient. Behind him, in the dark of the cave, I see dozens of burning footprints appear, leading into the blackness, and a small figure steps forward, wearing a ranger hat that's too big for her head. My legs feel weak as I stare at the small figure. It looks like Sarah, my Sarah, but something's not right. She's wearing the same blue jacket she had on the day she disappeared, but it's not dirty or torn. It looks brand new. "Baby?" My voice cracks. "Is that really you?" She steps forward, but stays in the cave's shadow. "Hi, Mommy. I've missed you." Mike is still standing there, unnaturally still. His black eyes are fixed on me, and a strange smile spreads across his face. It's too wide, showing too many teeth. "Sarah, honey, come to me," I say, holding up my hand. The research part of my brain is screaming warnings, but my mother's heart doesn't care. "I can't, Mommy. You have to come to us." Her voice sounds hollow, like it's coming from far away. They said you'd understand now. They said you're ready. Who said that, sweetie? I take one step closer, then another. That's when I feel it, a burning sensation in my arm, right where that strange creature scratched me last week. The cut is glowing now, giving off a faint red light that matches the moon above. The others, Mommy, the ones who showed me the truth. Sarah steps into the light, and I can finally see her face. My heart stops. Her eyes are just like Mike's, completely black. Behind her, more shapes appear in the cave. They look human, but they move wrong, like puppets with broken strings. I count 6, no, 7 of them. Each one leaves burning footprints, just like the ones I've been finding. The burning in my arm gets worse. I look down and see strange symbols appearing on my skin, glowing red like hot coals. They're the same symbols we found carved on the trees and animals. It's starting, Mike says in that strange, multiple voice. The change, just like it did for us. Sarah holds out her hand. Don't fight it, Mommy. It doesn't hurt, I promise. And then we can be together forever. Isn't that what you wanted? The moon above is fully red now, and I can feel something happening to me. My skin feels too tight, like it's trying to reshape itself. I have to make a choice, right now. But how can I choose between saving myself and saving my daughter? The pain in my arm is getting worse, spreading through my whole body now. The symbols are crawling up my neck, burning like fire. But I can't take my eyes off Sarah. What did they do to you? I whisper, tears running down my face. Sarah tilts her head in a way that's not quite human. They made me special, Mommy. They showed me things. How to change. How to be strong. She takes another step forward. How to survive. Suddenly, Mike drops to his knees, his body shaking. I watch in horror as his skin seems to ripple like water in a pond. The other shapes in the cave move closer, their footsteps leaving trails of fire. The moon is full, they all say together. The circle must be complete. My mind races back to all my research, all those stories about skinwalkers. The pieces click together, the missing pets, the strange symbols, the burning footprints. They've been planning this, waiting for this exact moment. Sarah, I say, fighting through the pain, we can find another way. We can, but I can't finish. The burning reaches my heart, and I fall to my knees. Through blurry eyes, I see Sarah walking towards me. Behind her, Mike's body is changing, stretching into something that's not human anymore. Don't be scared, Sarah says, touching my face with ice-cold fingers. Once you change, the pain goes away. We can run together in the forest, hunt together, be a family again. The moon above is the deepest red I've ever seen. My vision is starting to change. I can see heat now, see the glowing forms of animals hiding in the trees far away. Part of me wants to give in, to let the change happen. But then I remember something. The old stories didn't just talk about skinwalkers. They talked about those who fought them, those who used their own curse against them. With the last bit of my strength, I pull out the necklace I've been wearing since Sarah disappeared. It's an old protection charm the local tribe's chief gave me. It starts to glow blue, fighting against the red light of the moon. Sarah hisses and steps back. The others make a sound that's not quite human, not quite animal. I'm going to save you, baby, I say, standing up shakily. But not like this, never like this. The charm grows brighter, and I feel something new inside me. Power, but different from what the skinwalkers offered. This feels clean, pure. Sarah screams, but it's not her voice anymore, and I know what I have to do. The blue light from my necklace gets brighter and brighter, making the skinwalkers back away. Even Mike, now barely looking human, crawls backwards into the shadows. But Sarah stays where she is, her black eyes fixed on me. You're hurting them, Mommy. You're hurting me. No, baby, I say, my voice stronger now. I'm trying to save you. This isn't you. This isn't what you're supposed to be. The burning in my body is fighting against the blue light. I can feel two different kinds of power trying to take over: the Skinwalker's dark magic and the pure energy from the charm. Suddenly, Sarah's face changes. For just a second, I see my real daughter there. Scared, confused, trapped. "Mommy, I'm cold," she whispers in her real voice. "I'm so cold." That's when I know what to do. Fighting through the pain, I walk towards her. The other Skinwalkers screech and try to stop me, but the blue light keeps them back. Even as parts of my skin start to ripple and change, I keep walking. "Do you remember what I used to tell you when you were scared?" I ask Sarah, getting closer. She blinks, and for a moment, her eyes aren't completely black. That love is stronger than fear." "That's right, baby. I'm right in front of her now. The Skinwalkers are howling, the moon is glowing blood, red, and my body feels like it's being torn apart. But none of that matters." I pull Sarah into my arms and hold her tight. She struggles at first, her skin ice cold against mine. "I've got you," I whisper. "I've always got you." The charm around my neck pulses, sending waves of blue light through both of us. Sarah screams, a sound that's half human, half something else. The other Skinwalkers are shrieking too, their bodies twisting and changing in the cave. I feel the darkness trying to take Sarah back, but I hold on tighter. Love is stronger than fear. I say again and again like a prayer. The moon reaches its highest point. The red light and blue light clash around us like two storms meeting. Sarah's body feels like it's burning and freezing at the same time in my arms. And then everything goes white. When I open my eyes, the sun is rising. I'm lying on the ground near the cave, and my whole body aches. The charm around my neck is now just a normal necklace again, its blue light gone. "Sarah?" I call out, my voice hoarse. Then I see her, lying a few feet away. She looks exactly like she did 5 years ago, like not a single day has passed. But this time, when she opens her eyes, they're her normal brown color, my daughter's eyes. "Mommy?" she says weakly. "What happened? I was so lost for so long." I crawl over to her and wrap her in my arms. She's warm now, not ice cold like before. "You're back, baby," I whisper. "You're really back." We look around. The cave entrance has collapsed, sealed with huge rocks. There's no sign of Mike or the other Skinwalkers, just some burned footprints that are already fading in the morning light. But we're both different now. I can feel it. The Skinwalker magic left its mark on us, but the charm changed it somehow, made it better, cleaner. When I look at my arm, the glowing symbols are still there, but they're blue now instead of red. Sarah looks at her own arms, where similar marks glow softly. Are we still human, Mommy?" I kiss her forehead. "We're something else now, sweetheart. Something new. But we're together, and that's what matters. We can't go back to our old lives, we both know that. The forest calls to us in a way it never did before. We can feel every animal, every tree, every breath of wind. But unlike the Skinwalkers, we don't want to hurt anything. We want to protect it. So we stay in the forest. The locals whisper about us now, the mother and daughter who guard the woods. They say we appear when hikers are lost, leading them to safety with a soft blue light. They say we keep the dark things away, the things that leave burning footprints and hunt in the night. Sometimes on full moon nights, we run through the trees together faster than any human could. We change our shapes, but not to hurt, to help, to heal, to protect. We are the guardians now. And every night, before Sarah goes to sleep in our new home deep in the forest, I tell her the same thing I always have. Love is stronger than fear. Now she knows just how true that is. My name is Frank O'Malley, and I've been a ranger here at Apostle Islands for over 20 years now. At 51, I've seen pretty much everything these waters can throw at a person. Or at least, that's what I thought until last summer. What happened then? Well, it changed everything I believed about our lake. You see, Lake Superior isn't just any body of water. Us locals know it has its moods, its secrets, but nothing could have prepared me for what was lurking in Devil's Lake. Even now, my hands shake a bit when I think about it. Before I tell you what happened, you should know a bit about me. I used to be in the Navy SEALs, spent 12 years diving in some of the world's most dangerous waters. After that, I thought being a park ranger would be peaceful. Funny how life proves you wrong. I've got my own demons too. The bottle used to be my best friend, but I've been sober for 3 years now. Every day is still a fight, but I'm winning it. My AA chip stays in my pocket, right next to my ranger badge. Both remind me of who I am now. This morning started like any other. I was doing my usual dawn patrol, checking the shoreline in my boat. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The lake was calm. Too calm, actually. No birds flying, no fish jumping, just silence. That's when I saw them, hundreds of dead fish floating on the surface. Their silver bodies looked wrong somehow, twisted in ways that fish bodies shouldn't twist. And their eyes were just gone. Not eaten, not damaged, just empty. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Those dead fish were the first warning sign of something much, much worse hiding in the depths of Devil's Lake. Well, sit tight. This story isn't for the faint of heart, but it needs to be told. Someone has to know the truth about what's down there, still waiting in the dark water. I remember heading back to the ranger station that morning, my mind racing about those dead fish. Just as I was tying up my boat, Old Joe, one of the local Native American elders, was waiting for me at the dock. His face was more serious than I'd ever seen it. "The lake is troubled, Frank," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our people have stories about what lives in these waters, things that sleep for many years before they wake up hungry." I wanted to brush it off as just another legend, but something in his eyes made me listen. Plus, after 20 years here, I'd learned that the old stories often had some truth to them. That afternoon, things got worse. A call came in about 2 missing teenagers, Sarah Miller and Tom Brooks. They'd gone swimming near Devil's Point, a usually safe spot. Their clothes and phones were still on the beach, but there was no sign of them. During the search, I noticed something strange. The water kept swirling in places where it shouldn't, like something big was moving underneath. My sonar equipment was acting weird too, showing shapes that made no sense. Things that looked too big to be fish but moved too fast to be rocks. That night, I had my first nightmare. I was underwater, deep down where the light doesn't reach. Something was singing, not like whales or dolphins, but like people singing without words. The sound was beautiful but wrong, like it was trying to pull me deeper. I woke up covered in sweat, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my morning coffee. The dream felt real, too real. And the weird thing? When I got to work that morning, my fellow ranger Mike said he'd had the same exact dream. Later that day, more reports came in. People were seeing lights under the water at night. Pets were going missing near the shore. And the lake felt different. Even tourists were saying they felt like something was watching them from the water. I've spent enough time in dangerous situations to know when something's really wrong. And everything inside me was screaming that we were about to find out just how wrong things could get. 3 days after finding those dead fish, I led a diving team to check out the underwater caves near Devil's Point. There were 4 of us, me, Mike, Sarah from the Marine Biology Department, and Tom, our equipment expert. The water was unusually cold that day, even for Lake Superior. As we went deeper, our lights showed something that made us all stop. There were carvings on the cave walls, old ones. They showed strange creatures, half human and half fish, swimming among normal people. But that wasn't the scariest part. "Frank, you need to see this." Sarah's voice crackled through our radio. She was pointing her light at what looked like a huge doorway, carved right into the rock. It wasn't natural, someone or something had made it. That's when our equipment started failing. First, the compass went crazy, spinning in all directions. Then Tom's oxygen gauge started showing wrong numbers. We decided to go deeper anyway. That was our first big mistake. The cave opened into a massive underwater room. Our lights showed things that shouldn't be there, stone structures that looked like buildings, but not like anything I'd ever seen before. They were covered in a strange, glowing moss that gave off a faint blue light. Suddenly, Mike's radio went dead. When we turned around, he was gone. Just gone. No bubbles, no sign of struggle, nothing. 20 years of diving experience just disappeared into the dark water. We searched for an hour until our air started running low. As we were about to head back, I saw something move in the corner of my light beam. It was big, maybe as big as a person, but it moved like nothing I'd ever seen before. When I turned to get a better look, it was gone. Back on the surface, none of us could explain what we'd seen. The police started a search for Mike, but I knew we wouldn't find him. Not up here, anyway. The lake had taken him, just like it had taken those teenagers. That night, the nightmares got worse. This time, I could hear Mike's voice in that underwater singing. And when I woke up, my clothes were wet with lake water, even though I'd been in my bed all night. Something was happening in Devil's Lake, something that was getting worse by the day, and I had a feeling we were running out of time to stop it. Things changed fast after Mike disappeared. Scientists from the government showed up in their fancy white vans. They set up a lab right by the lake, taking water samples and doing all sorts of tests. But I could tell they were just as scared as we were. Then it happened, the tourist boat incident. I'll never forget that scream over the radio. "Something's in the water," the boat captain yelled. "It's pulling us down." I got there in my rescue boat as fast as I could. The tourist boat, the Lake Lady, was spinning in a circle, like it was caught in a whirlpool. But there shouldn't have been any whirlpool there. The water was too deep. Through my binoculars, I saw something that made my blood freeze. There were hands, gray, webbed hands, reaching up from the water, grabbing the boat's sides. Not just one or two, but dozens of them. We managed to save most of the people, but 3 passengers went missing. The boat itself was a wreck, with huge claw marks along its bottom. That same night, something even worse happened. Billy, the town's fisherman, came into the ranger station. His skin was pale gray, and his neck, I swear I saw gills forming on his neck. "The water," he kept saying. "The water's calling me, Frank. They want us all to come home." We took him to the hospital, but by morning he was gone. They found his wet footprints leading straight back to the lake. The town's water supply started showing strange readings. People were getting sick. Kids were having the same nightmares about underwater singing. Pets wouldn't go near the lake anymore. Animals always know when something's wrong. I spent that night looking through old files, trying to make sense of it all. That's when I found something interesting. Every 30 years, almost exactly, there had been similar disappearances. And now I knew why. They were waking up again. But this time was different. This time they weren't just hunting, they were changing people. And I had a horrible feeling I knew why. The military showed up next. Black helicopters, soldiers in hazmat suits, and big trucks full of equipment. They tried to keep it quiet, but in a small town like ours, everyone knew something big was happening. That's when I found out the truth. Late one night, an old friend from my Navy SEAL days, now working for the government, pulled me aside. "Frank," he whispered, looking nervous, "there's something you need to know. Back in the 1960s, they dumped nuclear waste in the deepest part of Devil's Lake. They thought it was safe, thought nothing could survive down there. They were wrong." It all started making sense, the creatures, the changes in people, even the glowing moss in the caves. The radiation had been changing things down there for decades, creating something different. That night, the attacks got worse. 6 more people disappeared. The creatures were getting bolder, coming closer to shore. I saw one clearly for the first time under the full moon. It was like a person, but with gray, scaly skin huge black eyes, and webbed hands with sharp claws. It moved so fast, like it was born in the water. The military tried to fight back. They brought in special underwater weapons and divers, but the creatures were too smart, too quick. They could control the water somehow, creating whirlpools that swallowed boats whole. I knew what we had to do. The nuclear waste had to be destroyed, and the creatures' nest with it. But the military's plans weren't working. Someone needed to go down there, someone who knew these waters, someone who could plant explosives in the right place. I looked at my AA chip, thinking about all I had to lose. Then I thought about Mike, about those missing teenagers, about Billy, about what would happen if these creatures kept spreading. I made my decision. I would go down there myself. "Give me the explosives," I told my old Navy friend. "I know where their nest is. I know how to end this." He tried to talk me out of it, but we both knew there was no other way. The next morning, I prepared for my last dive. The sun wasn't even up yet, and the lake was covered in a thick fog. I could hear those underwater songs clearer now, like they were calling me too. I put on my diving gear slowly, checking everything twice. The explosives were in a special waterproof bag. I had enough air for 3 hours. It would have to be enough. "Frank," Sarah called out just as I was about to jump in. "The sonar! It's showing hundreds of them down there. They're all gathering in the deep part." "Good," I said. "That's where I need them to be." The water was colder than ever as I went down. My flashlight showed the way, but something was different. The water itself seemed to glow with a faint blue light, like the moss we'd seen in the caves. At 100 feet deep, I saw the first one. It swam right past me, like it didn't care I was there. Then another, and another. They were all heading to the same place, the nuclear waste site. That's when I saw it, a huge underwater cave, bigger than a football field. Inside, thousands of eggs glowed with that same blue light. And in the middle of it all was something massive, their queen. She was twice the size of the others, with a crown-like growth on her head that glowed brightly. But what really got me were the people, dozens of them, floating in some kind of bubble, half transformed into creatures. I saw Mike among them, his skin already turning gray, gills forming on his neck. I started placing the explosives around the nuclear waste containers. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. Just then, the Queen saw me. Her huge black eyes fixed on mine, and I heard her voice in my head. "Join us," she seemed to say. "Become one with the water." For a moment, I almost wanted to. The song was so beautiful, so peaceful. But I thought about my town, about all the people up there. I couldn't let this spread. I set the timer for 5 minutes. That's when everything went crazy. The creatures realized what I was doing. They all started swimming toward me at once. The water turned into chaos. Hundreds of gray bodies, claws, and those black eyes everywhere. I hit the detonator button and started swimming up as fast as I could, but they were faster. One grabbed my leg, then another caught my air tank. I could feel their cold hands pulling me back down. 4 minutes, I thought, fighting to break free. That's when I saw Mike swimming toward me. He wasn't fully transformed yet. His eyes were still human. For a second, they cleared up, like he recognized me. He grabbed the creatures holding me and pulled them away. "Go," he mouthed. "Save them." I swam up as hard as I could. My air was running low and my legs were burning. The surface seemed so far away. 3 minutes. The Queen's voice got louder in my head, trying to make me turn back. The water started swirling, trying to pull me down. I kept thinking about my AA chip in my pocket, one day at a time. Just keep going. 2 minutes. I was only halfway up. My lungs were on fire. The creatures were following me, but staying back, like they were scared of something. 1 minute. I could see the surface now, but it looked wrong. The water above me was starting to boil. My depth gauge was going crazy. Then everything went white. The explosion was like nothing I'd ever felt. The shock wave hit me hard, sending me spinning. My mask came off. Water rushed into my mouth. The last thing I remember was a bright blue light everywhere and the Queen's scream in my head. Then, nothing. They found me on the beach 3 days later. I was the only survivor. The lake is quiet now, but sometimes, on full moon nights, people still hear singing from the deep water. They never found the others. The government says it was all an earthquake and toxic gas leak. They closed off Devil's Lake and built a fence around it. But I know the truth. And sometimes, in my dreams, I still hear them calling. That was 5 months ago. Our town isn't the same anymore. Most people moved away, can't blame them. Those who stayed don't talk about what happened. It's easier that way, I guess. The government people built a research center near the lake. They say they're studying water quality, but we all know they're watching for something else. Every night, their spotlights scan the water's surface. I still work as a ranger, but not near Devil's Lake. Some nights, I sit on my porch and look at the water in the distance. The blue glow is gone now, but sometimes, when the moon is full, I see ripples where there shouldn't be any. Last week, a kid found something on the beach, a strange, scaly thing that looked like a hand. The government people took it away before anyone could take pictures. They said it was just a deformed fish part. Sarah still works at the marine lab. She told me the water samples are different now. Something in that explosion changed the lake's chemistry. Nothing lives in the deep parts anymore. No fish, no plants, nothing. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. My hair is turning gray in patches, and sometimes when I take a shower, I feel like my skin is different, rougher, like sandpaper. The doctors say it's nothing, just stress. But I know better. Old Joe, he's the only one who still talks about it openly. They're not gone, he told me yesterday. They're just sleeping again. 30 years, Frank. In 30 years, they'll be back. I'll be too old then, but I've written everything down. Someone needs to know the truth. Someone needs to be ready. Because the deep ones, they're patient. They can wait. And sometimes, on really quiet nights, when I'm alone, I can still hear that song in my head, calling me back to the water. My name is Maria Ramirez, and I've spent most of my life exploring caves. People call me crazy for choosing a life in darkness, but there's something magical about being the first person to shine a light where no one has ever been before. At least, that's what I used to think. I'm 45 now, and after getting my PhD in geology, I've mapped more cave systems than I can count. But Mammoth Cave? This place is different. It's not just the world's longest cave system. It's like a living, breathing thing. Sometimes, I swear it changes when no one's looking. I should probably mention that I survived a cave collapse 10 years ago. 3 days trapped in complete darkness, with only my headlamp for company. Most people would quit after something like that, but it just made me more careful, more prepared. My brain works like a camera. One look at a cave map, and it's stuck in my head forever. That's probably why I'm still alive today. This morning started like any other at base camp. The smell of terrible coffee from our ancient coffee maker, Jake complaining about the humidity making his equipment fog up, and Sarah checking our safety gear for the 100th time. Everything was normal until the ground started shaking. It wasn't a big earthquake, just enough to make our coffee cups dance across the table. But when it stopped, Tom came running in from his morning check of the main passage. His face was white as chalk. "Dr. Ramirez," he said, trying to catch his breath. "You need to see this. The earthquake. It opened something." I grabbed my gear and followed him. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of everything. The beginning of the horror that would change all our lives forever. Looking back now, I wish we'd just sealed up that passage and walked away. But scientists don't walk away from discoveries. We just don't, even when we should. That's how our story began. The new passage was barely wider than my shoulders. Our lights showed fresh cracks in the limestone walls. The earthquake had definitely made this opening. The air coming from it felt different, older somehow, and carried a strange smell I'd never encountered in any cave before. "Everyone, basic safety check." I called out to my team. Sarah, Tom, and Jake nodded, double-checking their helmets, lights, and rope gear. Working in caves for 20 years teaches you that shortcuts are deadly. As we squeezed through the narrow opening, our headlamps created dancing shadows on the walls. The passage started sloping downward, deeper than our maps had ever shown. That's when weird things began happening. First, it was Jake's compass. "Dr. Ramirez," he called out, his voice echoing, "something's wrong. The needle's spinning like crazy." Then our radio crackled with static before dying completely. One by one, our backup devices failed too. Even my reliable old GPS watch went black. In all my years of caving, I'd never seen anything like this. "Look there!" Sarah's voice trembled slightly as her light beam caught something on the wall. We moved closer, and my heart nearly stopped. The rock face was covered in drawings, ancient ones. They showed strange, tall figures that seemed to be coming out of the solid rock, but it was the warning symbols around them that made my skin crawl. "These markings," I whispered, "they're not like any Native American art I've seen before." The figures were drawn with lines that made them look hollow inside. And their hands weren't human at all. Tom took photos while I copied the symbols in my notebook. That's when we heard it, a sound that didn't belong in any cave. Like stone grinding against stone, but with a rhythm almost like footsteps, coming from somewhere deep below us. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's mark this spot and head back. We need better equipment and more lights before we go further." But as we turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something down there had already noticed us, something that had been waiting a very, very long time. The walk back felt longer than it should have. Our lights seemed dimmer and the shadows darker. When we finally squeezed back through the narrow opening, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Fresh scratch marks on the rocks, marks that hadn't been there when we went in. Back at base camp, none of our photos of the drawings came out clear, just blurry shapes in the darkness. But the image of those hollow figures was burned into my memory. Little did I know this was just the beginning of our nightmare. That night, none of us could sleep properly. The cave sounds were different, not the usual drips and echoes we were used to. Around 2 a.m., our equipment started acting weird again. The computers would turn on by themselves, showing nothing but static. The lights in base camp flickered, even though we had a separate power supply. Maybe we should call for backup, Sarah suggested during our morning meeting. She hadn't touched her breakfast, and the dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept either. "I already tried," Jake said, running his hands through his messy hair. "Phone lines are dead, and the satellite phone just gives off this strange buzzing sound." I looked at my team's tired faces. Something's not right here. Those drawings we found. I spent all night going through our reference books. There's nothing like them anywhere. And these equipment failures aren't normal. That's when Tom burst into the room. "You all need to see this," he said, breathing hard. "Remember those scratch marks we saw yesterday? They're gone. Completely gone. Like they were never there." We all rushed to the passage entrance. He was right. The rock was smooth, untouched. But there was something else. A fine powder covered the ground like crushed stone, making a trail leading deeper into the cave. "We need to document this," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Full gear. Nobody goes alone. Constant radio contact, even if they're not working right." As we prepared to go back in, I noticed the temperature dropping. Our breath came out in white puffs, unusual for this part of the cave. The deeper we went, following that trail of stone dust, the colder it got. Then we found the first missing equipment. Our backup cameras from yesterday were scattered across the floor, crushed like they'd been squeezed by giant hands. The memory cards were completely destroyed. "Dr. Ramirez," Jake whispered, his voice shaking. "Look at the walls." New drawings had appeared overnight, dozens of them. The hollow figures were different now. They seemed to be coming out of the walls, reaching for something. Or someone. The grinding sound started again, closer this time. But now we could hear something else with it. A low humming that made our teeth hurt and our heads spin. Sarah's light flickered and died. Then Tom's. One by one, our lights started failing. The darkness felt alive, pressing in around us. And in that darkness, I saw something move, something that shouldn't have been possible. A shape emerged from the solid rock wall, tall and thin, its body seeming to bend in ways that weren't human. It had no eyes that I could see, but somehow, I knew it was looking right at us. "Run!" I screamed. But as we turned to escape, we realized something horrible. The passage behind us had changed. The way back to base camp wasn't there anymore. We were trapped, and we weren't alone. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. We were huddled together in the dim light of my last working flashlight, backs against the cold cave wall. The creature, that thing that came out of the rock, was still there, just at the edge of our light. "Nobody move," I whispered. Years of cave experience had taught me that panic kills faster than anything else. But this was beyond any training I'd ever had. The creature tilted what seemed to be its head, like it was curious about us. The humming got louder, and I felt a strange pressure in my head, like someone was trying to push thoughts into my brain. From the way the others were grimacing, they felt it too. Suddenly, Tom screamed, "They're in the floor! They're coming through the floor!" He was right. More shapes were rising from the ground like swimmers coming up through water, but this was solid rock. I counted 5. No, 7 of them. The hollow ones, as I would later call them, were surrounding us. Then Sarah noticed something. "The light!" she gasped. "They're staying back from the light." She was right. Our last flashlight was creating a small circle of safety. The creatures wouldn't cross into it, but they were waiting just beyond its reach, swaying slightly like seaweed in an invisible current. "When I say run," I said quietly, "we move together. Stay in the light. Go only where I go, understand?" Everyone nodded. I could feel them trembling against me. "Now." We moved as one, keeping tight together as I swept the flashlight ahead of us. The creatures followed, gliding through the rock walls like they were walking through air. The grinding noise was all around us now, along with that horrible humming that made it hard to think. Then Jake tripped. He fell outside our circle of light. The scream he let out, I'll hear it in my nightmares forever. We spun around with the light, but he was already gone. Just gone. Like he'd never existed. "Keep moving," I ordered, fighting back tears. "The light's getting dimmer. We need to find a way out." But the cave had other plans. Every tunnel we took led us deeper underground. The air was getting thinner, colder, and our last light was fading fast. That's when we saw it, a faint glow ahead. Not our light, something else, something that looked like. "Is that sunlight?" Sarah whispered hopefully. But I knew better. In my gut, I knew we weren't being led to safety. We were being herded. The hollow ones were taking us exactly where they wanted us to go. The chamber ahead was enormous, bigger than anything we'd ever seen in Mammoth Cave. But the glow wasn't sunlight. It was coming from strange, glowing crystals in the walls. They pulsed with a sickly greenish light, like a heartbeat. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. Now we could see what this place really was. The entire chamber was filled with bones. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Some looked ancient, but others were fresh. I spotted modern climbing gear and cameras scattered among them. We weren't the first ones to be led here. Tom grabbed my arm. "Dr. Ramirez, look at the walls." The chamber walls were covered in more of those drawings, but these were different. They told a story. The hollow ones had been here longer than humans. They were the original inhabitants of these caves. And they'd been taking people for food. Not their bodies, but something else. Their fear, their terror. That's what kept them alive. Our flashlight flickered again, almost dead now. "There's another tunnel," I said, pointing. It slopes upward. It might lead to... A scream cut me off. Tom was being pulled into the wall, the rock somehow becoming liquid around him. Sarah and I grabbed his arms, pulling with all our strength, but it was like fighting quicksand. "Don't let go," he begged. "Please don't." And then, he was gone. Sarah broke down sobbing. Half our team was gone now. The humming in our heads was getting stronger, and I could feel the hollow ones moving closer in the dim crystal light. That's when I remembered something. Something from my old geology studies. The cave's unusual magnetic properties, the equipment failures. These creatures were somehow connected to the cave's magnetic field. "Sarah," I said, pulling out the emergency flares from my pack. "These crystals, they're not just for light. They're like a power source for these things. If we could destroy them. But how? We only have 3 flares and..." She never finished that sentence. A pale, long-fingered hand reached through the floor and grabbed her ankle. I caught her hand, but I wasn't strong enough. The last thing I saw was her terrified face as she was pulled into the solid rock. I was alone now. Just me and the creatures that had hunted humans for thousands of years. And my last flare. That's when I made my decision. If these things fed on fear, I'd give them something else to feed on. Something that might end this forever. My hands were shaking as I pulled out all 3 flares. The hollow ones were getting closer, their bodies swaying in that terrible way. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was angry. "You want something to feed on?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the chamber. "Come and get it." I lit the first flare, its bright red light making the creatures back away. The magnetic reader on my wrist was going crazy. These crystals were definitely the key. They weren't just glowing, they were powering this whole place. I threw the first flare at the largest crystal cluster. The explosion was bigger than I expected. These crystals were unstable. The hollow ones made a sound I'll never forget, like stones screaming. "This is for Jake." I lit the second flare. "For Tom." I threw it at another crystal cluster. "For Sarah." The chamber was shaking now. Rocks were falling from the ceiling. The hollow ones were moving faster, more desperately. They weren't swaying anymore. They were angry. I had 1 flare left. The biggest crystal cluster was right above me. If I hit it right, the whole chamber might collapse. But I'd probably die too. I thought about all the other people who died here. About all the future victims these creatures would take if I didn't stop them now. My last working light died. In the dim glow of the remaining crystals, I saw the hollow ones rushing toward me from every direction, through the walls, floor, and ceiling. I lit the last flare. "This is for everyone you've ever killed," I whispered. I threw it as hard as I could at the central crystal cluster. The explosion was blinding. The chamber started collapsing immediately. The hollow ones were shrieking, their bodies breaking apart like crumbling statues. I ran for the upward tunnel, but I wasn't fast enough. A rock hit my head, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was buried under small rocks, but somehow still alive. The crystals were all destroyed. The chamber was sealed. And the hollow ones, I couldn't feel them anymore. But I was trapped, deep underground, with no way out. That was 3 days ago. My headlamp died yesterday. I'm writing this on my phone. Its battery, almost dead. The rescue teams probably think we all died in a cave collapse. In a way, they're right. But sometimes, in the darkness, I hear something. Not the hollow ones. Something else. Like whispers in the rocks. And I wonder, did I really stop them, or did I just make them angry? My phone's about to die. If anyone finds this, seal up this cave. Fill it with concrete. Because if I didn't stop them completely, they'll come back. And next time, they'll be hungry. That was 5 days ago. They found me, barely alive, in a small air pocket. The rescue team said it was a miracle. They'd picked up a faint signal from my phone, even though it had died. But I don't believe in miracles anymore. Not after what I've seen. I'm in the hospital now, writing this down before I forget any details. The official story is that there was a cave collapse, killing 3 members of my team. The newspapers called it a tragic accident. If only they knew the truth. Strange things keep happening. My hospital room's electronics act weird at night. The lights flicker. And sometimes, when everything is quiet, I hear that familiar humming sound. Yesterday, a young ranger from Mammoth Cave visited me. "Dr. Ramirez," he said, looking nervous, "we found something you should know about. The cave, it's changing. New passages are appearing where the collapse happened. And at night, the instruments pick up vibrations, like something's moving down there." I asked him about the chamber with the crystals. He shook his head. "We can't find it. Every time we think we're getting close, the passages shift. But we found this." He showed me a photo on his phone. Fresh scratch marks on the cave walls. And next to them, words carved into solid rock. "We remember you, Maria. The Rangers want me to come back as a consultant to help them understand what's happening. They think my expertise could help prevent more accidents. But I know better. The Hollow Ones aren't gone. They're just waiting, growing stronger. And this time, they know my name." Last night, my phone rang. When I answered, there was only static. But in that static, I heard something, the sound of stone grinding against stone, and what sounded like whispers saying my name. They're coming back, and they're not just staying in the caves anymore. So, if you're reading this, and you hear strange sounds in the walls at night, or see shadows moving where they shouldn't, don't investigate. Don't try to be brave. Just run. Because the Hollow Ones remember. They always remember. And they're still hungry.